So let's go ahead and get started with my talk today, which is 10 lessons from Millennials making games. And I want to start at the beginning. When I was 5 years old, I remember making my first game. I used what was around me. There was a tree and like a really noisy rotary sprinkler, and that rotary sprinkler came on between 7 and 8 p.m. during summer nights. And I had a grand opportunity there to create a game, which now in retrospect was kind of like capture the flag, but mixed with a little bit of laser tag, minus the flag and minus the gun and the laser. I called it the sprinkler game. Wasn't too creative on that front. So the goal of my game was, you had, okay, this is a tree. This is the tree. This is where the sprinkler head was lodged. And you would have a half moon of like area that would be the soak zone. So you would start on this side, and you had to very coy and meticulously, you could run, you could jump, you could duck, but you had to make it from here, back to here, and back and forth without getting wet. This game was made more exciting when my sister Nicole would play with me. Of course, with multiple characters, the game dynamics really began to change. You know, there was a heightened sense of competition. We would try to psych each other out. You know, are you going to go? Are you not going to go? And then you could wind up getting squirted. You know, we would run faster, which meant that we would sacrifice a little bit of our ability to control our bodies because we were going just a little faster. And over time, as the grass got wet and we had matted it down quite a few times, it would start getting slippery. So we had all these competing things that were going on. And, you know, this game was, and on top of all of that, we only had an hour to play. So this game really was a joy. For me, I could play it alone, or I could play it with people. And this is from as long as I can remember, I have been hooked on games. So I'm going to go back here. I am generation millennial. You're looking at it, born here, early to mid 80s. There's a ton of research that kind of sums this up in an article down here by N.G. Schweitzer and Long, but they summarize that my generation, we want it all, and we want it now. And I think the important thing here is that we have big expectations. We have expectations of ourselves and our environment, and we want to do a lot of stuff, and we're not really willing to settle down on one thing. And that we'll come back to talk about later. But so this is our profile, my very skimpy and profile of the millennial generation. And I don't know if this is really important for you guys to know, but how I got here today was there were some kind of key moments that I wanted to share with you. SIGGRAPH in 2010 I attended, and it blew my mind because for the first time in a really effective way I was watching artists and scientists working together to produce emerging new technologies, and it blew my mind away, and I was like, oh, these are my people. And after that, I was searching on campus for some way I could get involved, and that's when I met EPICS, which at the time was called AIUI, Animation and Interaction at Iowa. And I, you know, after a few months after visiting SIGGRAPH, I joined EPIC Studios. And so that started that adventure. And then I went back not this past year, but the year before, and I got the sheer pleasure to observe and to absorb a talk by Jane McGonigal. And to summarize what she was talking about, she was discussing gaming can make a better world. And she's written an amazing book, if you haven't read it. It's called Reality is Broken, and why games make us better and how they can change the world. And she really summarizes everything from positive psychology and the emergence of that to how games can make us, well, when played in a certain amount of time during the week, how they can make us resilient and stronger, and that it can improve our cognitive functioning. So she's just done a lot of research, and she blew my mind away. Again, So I wanted just to put those up there. It's a little, it's not terribly relevant. So this brings us to Epic Studios. It is a student organization. A lot of you know what Epic Studios is because you're part of it. Can I just see like some hands here? Who has ever been to an Epics event, whether it be EpicsCon? Okay, so we got a nice number. Thank you everyone for coming out. Epic Studios is student-run, students teaching each other about digital media, specifically animation. We're trying to build video games, and there's no leader of the pack. We are teaching each other, so it is really a collaborative effort from the students, leading each other, and it's a real effort of sharing knowledge and sharing skills. Now, I did put some websites up here, and maybe I'll see if this will work. Okay, so can you see this okay? It's kind of cutting off over here, but this is our Epic Studios Facebook page, and the reason I didn't show you our website is because we're overhauling it. But you should come online. We post our events that are happening as part of Epics. And the Facebook group is AI.org. So they're a University of Iowa student group. They do animation, gaming, interactive digital media, and it's not limited to those things. It's really what the students want to do. And to give you some examples of what they've done before, they host weekly learning sessions. They cover topics from programming, Unity, Photoshop, game design, and much more. They host mini conferences, so each semester they'll do like a collection of speakers from maybe the state or the Midwest to come in and talk about a topic. Last spring we had Epics Indie, which we invited Iowa-based independent developers out, and it was a superb. It was a top-notch talk. I was so pleased. The speakers were fantastic, and we also invite guest speakers to campus. Over the summer, John and Brenda Romero came. They donated their time and sat with 36 people in a room for three hours just to talk shop. It was fantastic. They also traveled to studios. Last summer we went to Chicago and visited some studios there. There's also been some tours in San Francisco. They host game tournaments. So if you're on the other side of games where you like to play games, there's opportunity for you to get involved. And finally, they host EpicsCon, which is an animation and gaming conference in the spring. And I'm going to talk about some of these activities as the talk goes on. But let's go ahead and get right into the meat of things. The things that I've learned from 2 years of being involved in this group, and I started with web development because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I first joined, and it was complicated. There were so many parts to making a game. I was overwhelmed by what I could potentially do. So I started in web development, and I moved my way through 3D design. Then I moved into environment design and some animation work, and then I started taking on some roles of trainings and planning other events. But the thing that I've learned that's probably the most important thing is that making games is a lot harder than it looks or than you think it's going to be. This is John and Brenda Romero, and when they came, do you guys know John Romero? Does that name? Okay, we're going to go forward so we can go backwards. Doom, does that ring a bell? Okay, Wolfenstein 3Ds are like influential games. This guy produced engines that could, accurately represent three-dimensional space in an effective way. Doom, he just basically solidified PC gaming and created a whole genre of run and shooting games. So that's John. Brenda, she has her own amazing history. She's been making games since she was 15 and being paid to make games. And when they came, one of the things they said to me was, I made 36 games before I got my first one published, and it was in a magazine. Now, the times were different. But my point is that it's really hard to make games, and one of the, I guess I should back up and just frame that as I'm talking today, I'm really going to be using my experiences with Epic Studios to frame how I understand and make sense of these lessons. So for example, games are challenging. When I came in, I thought I could make a game until I started getting into the actual nitty-gritty of making a game. And it just is so complex, and there's so many roles and tasks. It's really hard to keep up. Here's just a list of all of the roles that when I joined Epic Studios that one could join and take ownership of. So, but I think generally speaking, you know, collaboration is really what it comes down to here to make a game and have it be successful. I mean, one guy in a room can make a game, but there's a lot of sacrifices to do that. And so to make a game, you really want to collaborate with people to do it, and don't expect your first one to be any good. There might be just like a seed of something that's worth, you know, reworking and working over and over again. And whether you're out to make a good game or not, just making it is the process that's important. So AAA studios spend upwards of $100 million to make games. Games like Grand Theft Auto 5, I think they probably spent over $200 million on that game. Most of them don't spend quite that much, but they have like hundreds of people for years working on games, from marketing to engineering, art, publishing, and the trend that I've been seeing with Epic Studios is that students and people come in and they're rearing to make their masterpieces that they've been wanting to make. The Millennials, remember, we want it all and we want it now. And the problem is that they don't have skills, they don't have the basics, they don't know how to do any programming perhaps, or maybe they don't know how to even modify existing code. They don't know the basics about design, theory, nor have they ever experimented with the software that we might be using in the group. So in many cases, they may not have even, you know, play tested a game before. So the challenge in making games is figuring out strategies for the students to bootstrap each other up, because we don't have you know, your traditional pedagogy of an instructor and you know, your receiver, but we have a bunch of students that have varying backgrounds and varying skills. And so this is the challenge in our, and I'm going to talk probably a lot about this, but let's keep going. So lesson 2, making games can help bridge communication. This is what it's like in the real world, to have two people from very different backgrounds coming together. So I think what's happening with Epic Studios is really special and unique. And I don't know of any groups, and if you do, please share with me other student groups that are you know, teaching each other and having these collaborative projects. Because I think what's happening in this group mirrors what's happening in the real world, which is, you know, you have to work with a lot of different people to get stuff done. So some examples of barriers to communication that I've found during game making is artists, they say sprites, programmers say texture maps, but really they're talking about the same thing. They're talking about an image that goes onto a, well, in programmers it's a plane, but so yeah, I'll just show you this cute little sprite that is a demo sprite that we use for teaching. So yeah, this is just one example where making games forces people to communicate through some really challenging obstacles, because the thing that you have that's different is a shared goal at the end of the path. You have a shared interest to bring something to life. I also learned that making games is about more than just making games, and it's now part of our culture. And you know, all of these sort of lessons tie into each other, so I'm going to just keep going because we're running low on time. Also, making games is about knowledge sharing and problem solving. This is possibly the biggest barrier to successful game making has been the knowledge sharing part. And it's so critical in higher education, student-run organizations, because the turnover ebbs and flows with the academic schedule. And what we see is that we'll have 60 students start at the beginning of the semester, and then over the course of midterms, and then a lot will drop out because, you know, maybe they're just not, they've got other things that are taxing their time. And then we'll get another round of 60 students coming in. And the real challenge has been consistency across semesters. How do we, you know, train these new students that are coming in and have them be able to continue a game that's already been started? So and I'm going to talk a little bit about the structure of how Epics has succeeded and failed and how they've produced games in the past. But I think, oh, here we go. So the organizational structure for the first year was in the fall to build a game, in the spring to build another game, and there were 3 major divisions of labor: art, programming, and UI. And there was kind of a lead for each team, and they met independently of the meeting each week. In addition, there would be a weekly learning session, and there was supplemental self-guided learning available through digital tutors. This was really successful in that we completed 2 games. I guess my measure right now is, did we complete something? Or do we have a working demo of a prototype of a game? Last year, we wanted to change things up because one of the challenges of this method is that because there was the changeover, the turnover of students, a lot would fall on one person's shoulders to do it, and it was the leads. The leads were doing, you know, a lot of the work at the end of the day. And so they wanted to create smaller pods of students, including programmers and artists and your UI designers, and put them together in small pods so that they would be responsible and have ownership over what they were creating. And so they restructured, and they created a game. I think the name is Time Machine. Can anyone confirm the name for game 2?
Time Trap.
Time Trap. Okay, I'll have to change that. Time Trap. So with year 2, they did pod-based learning with mixed groups, artists, and there was 1 pod per level. Just like I explained, we lost digital tutors funding, so we were down that, and then we also lost some learning sessions. And I'm not surprised that this is an incomplete game, but I'm going to talk maybe a little bit more if we have time about why that happened. And then I'm going to talk about this year's structure. We are doing, spring semester is going to be comprised of small collaborative learning projects that can be completed, you know, within 2 weeks, 3 weeks tops. And it's going to be with small teams of people. They're going to organize each other. And the idea is to start with the basics from board game design and work your way up to retro, vintage games, console games, you know, arcade console games, and then work your way up towards larger conceptual ideas about game making. So we have, in the spring semester plan, a big game. And we'll see what happens when we get there. But this is the plan, is that we're going to train them in the fall, give them the skills that they need so that they have a great portfolio beefed up with, you know, 5, 6 different prototypes of games. And then in the spring, they're going to have the skills to actually complete a large game in a timely fashion. And then we're going to break them up into groups. So there'll be the artists and the programmers will be together. Well, there'll be the artists in one group and the programmers in another. And then we're also doing a lot of supplemental learning sessions right now, and we have, you know, students are volunteering to do sessions. So, you know, Ryan did a session on Unity last week, which was really successful. And this goes back to the skill sharing through tech demos. We also are hoping to get digital tutors back if we can. If not, we will continue to produce sessions, small technical-based sessions that will go up on YouTube. So here's what you have. You have your kind of like your in-class learning that's happening as a group, as a big whole, and then you have your self-guided learning online through the supplemental materials. So that's going to be available on YouTube. We have drives where we share knowledge. We have some content management systems that are in place that have more materials so that people can branch out and learn more when they want to. So I want to give you just an example here, a beautiful example of problem solving and knowledge sharing that happened. This was 2 weeks ago, and what happened was we gave them like a mixed bag of goodies. It was everything from, and you can see here some of the things, cups and little gadgets and toys and Lego building blocks, and it was just an array of a collage bag of stuff. And we challenged them to get into groups and to make a game. And there were some parameters. You know, you had to have like a goal, and you had to have, you know, potentially had to have like a winner and a loser. So we kept it really simple. But the idea was to make a board game out of these items. And what happened was amazing. I wasn't able to be there because I was sick and sleeping, but I got the full report, and here are some pictures that were shared with me from the group-based learning that occurred. And I think some of the things that were reported were that there was some really unusual things that were happening that maybe you wouldn't necessarily expect in group-based projects. Typically, you might expect that one person would take the lead, and then the other group members would kind of fall in line and, you know, hem and haw and say yes or no. But what was reported to me was that everyone had a voice in these discussions. Because if you think about it, there's no right or wrong. And the problem is so hard because what you're being asked to do is reinvent objects that exist in the everyday world and give them a new purpose and string these things together into some kind of gameplay mechanics. So the risk for speaking up and maybe being wrong, or it's just really low. And the other thing is that I think that more quiet people have the opportunity to kind of speak up there. And so that was a really successful thing. In week 2, we had them get in new small groups, and we had about 4 games. And the games went in a workshop-style, round-robin fashion, and we set a timer for 10 minutes. And we had, you know, the group, they were all mixed up. And so they had 10 minutes to look at a game and add, delete, or modify, and justify everything that they do to improve the game mechanics. So this is someone that's looking at a game, they haven't seen it, they haven't played it before, and they're going to give you some quality feedback on whether this is fun or how can I make this better. And so that was really successful. The individuals or the groups that made the games now had 2 versions of a game, one which was the original, and one this, you know, Frankenstein of a game. And so next week they're actually going to take that and sift through all the feedback and, you know, start to put that into an actual format that they like based on their feedback. And then they're going to turn that into a video game. But, you know, steps. I think the important thing is that there's this real effort being placed on scaffold learning. And, you know, every step has a defined goal and learning outcomes. And what we do is maybe we like limit some of the mechanics just to make, you know, things move more quickly, but students have complete reign and control over what they want to do based on the parameters that are given to them. So let's get back here. Lesson 5, games can be more than win, kill, and defeat. A picture that I'm showing you here is from a game called Journey, which is a spectacular game about this little robed character here who communicates by singing and is kind of like collecting these scarves and flying around. And it's this really, you know, cinematically beautiful film. And it also was nominated for a 2013 Grammy for the soundtrack. for best soundtrack for visual media. So this was like a huge game because it brought, you know, what's going on in independent games. It brought it to the limelight and really elevated gaming and game making to a form of art. So some other recent trends in video games is to give games more meaning. And I've talked about this last semester that I talked. I gave like a really short thing on how games can have deeper meaning through topics of education or the humanities or social justice or environmentalism and government and more. So I'm not going to talk too much about the power of the game jam, but it is so powerful. A game jam is an opportunity for collaboration, like real-time, low-risk, low-commitment collaboration where typically they last about 48 hours, but you don't necessarily need to come with any ideas. In fact, it's kind of better if you don't come with ideas because then it really allows for that kind of collaborative experience. And over the course of, kind of a lock-in, 2-day lock-in, you team up, you play, you create a concept, and then you begin working on that concept right away and try to prototype whatever it is that you're trying to make, whether it's a game or some kind of game mechanic that you want to test out in a new environment. Game jams are really great. They're quick. I mean, for people that have changing schedules, a game jam is a perfect opportunity to meet, network with existing game developers, to network, to prototype, build resumes, and then at the end of the 48 hours, you kind of have like a show and tell of your work. It is an awesome experience, and I went to a few in Ames. Epic Studios has a really great connection with Ames, and we have people that come from Ames to most of our events, and they are really heavy. They have heavy, strong, great background in programming, and we have a lot of artists last year, so it kind of worked out. The pattern was that we had the artists and they had the programmers, and because we didn't quite understand game jams, like the power of the game jam, we always brought our own, we were always working on stuff as artists. We had animations, we had this or that. So we bring those projects and miss out on amazing opportunities to work with these programmers. So I highly recommend you go and bring nothing but your open mind and enjoy yourself. You don't have to sleep over if you don't want to. And then, oh yeah, so you don't have to be in Silicon Valley. That's kind of a given. Obviously, stuff is happening right here at your home, and there are a lot of opportunities. That Epics is really trying to wrap together these individual game developers across the state and bring them and foster a community. And what I've found is that through events like EpicsCon, people are traveling from all corners of the state to learn more and to be connected with other developers. Again, we're back to this whole bootstrapping each other up because at one point in time, and I think there have been gleaming moments in video game history, Iowa has made a stamp. Ottumwa had some kind of video game. They have is it an international award or a national award for their arcade gaming from the late 80s or something. And then, Budcat was here right in Iowa City. They were making Guitar Hero games before they got shut down in, I think, 2010 or something like that. But yeah, so EpicsCon and Epics Indie, I wanted just to put a shout out for those two events. And I hope that you all kind of keep an eye out for this spring when we have EpicsCon. It's an animation and gaming festival, and this year we're adding an actual animation festival to it, in addition to bringing guest speakers from all over. Last year we had. What I'm hoping to do next this was just really an overview of everything that I'm kind of thinking about, but my goal for my master's degree is to really have some kind of accumulation of everything here. And I think what I really want to do is to investigate this question of, is making games better than playing games or better than taking tests? And this really gets at, from an educational perspective, how can we from an educational perspective, there's a lot of questions of how can we adapt and, you know, tap into video games in the classrooms. And I want to propose that making games is really is a great tool with a few simple boundaries and you know, like a one-day training. Anyone could be teaching anyone how to make a game and could foster an environment on how to do that. And I think, you know, I have a hunch that making a game is in fact better than playing a game as far as like learning outcomes, because you have to know the material to make the game, and then you have to actually like test and retest the game. So, and then I think it's better than taking a test. It's far more entertaining, that's for sure. So I want to propose a qualitative and quantitative pilot study that's going to start in spring and through the summer. And the questions I want to look at are, what do people learn when they take a test via pen, paper, versus when they're playing educational games versus when they're making games, and what are the advantages and disadvantages to each of those. And I'm going to be working on some measures and outcomes, so if you have ideas, please come talk with me. And then I'm going to be using, you know, my observations with Epic Studios to sort of inform a model that I'll use when I do the actual pilot study. So thank you so much for your time and listening to me ramble up here. Hopefully you found a couple of gems that were interesting. Yes?
This is actually great, and I just want to say a couple things. One, I want to thank Megan